What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Point Forward, the podcast. Myself, Iguodala, my main man, Evan Turner.
What's up? What's up?
And as you've, a lot of you been aware, if you've been watching, whether on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or whatever ways you've taken in the content, you've seen how we've all been able to have these conversations without being in the same space. And I want to give a big shout out to the man, the myth, the legend who made all of that possible. He is our special guest today. Y'all welcome, man, Yuan, the founder and CEO of Zoom. Zoom Communications, might I add, because I know some stock, it gets a little confusing, right? There's another stock that has a Zoom in it, and they had an uptick when we went public in 2019. So thank you so much for making, our platform, Point Forward Podcast, being able to happen through video, and thank you for giving us some time today.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Evan. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I really appreciate for inviting me, and thank you.
Man, thank you. Like I said earlier, man, we wouldn't be able to be here without you, literally. So thank you once again. So
to kind of get things started, I guess we can kind of give some background on how we got here today, how you and I met. I remember we were at a conference. Was it Fortune or was it Forbes?
I also forgot. It's several years.
A few years ago, but it was a great interaction. I felt your energy right away. You were telling me you were big on basketball, and it was a different energy I got from you. How you said you respected my game and kind of the things that I do that doesn't go seen, and that's kind of the Point Forward thesis. With Evan, we spent our time in Philly, his game being in that same lane in terms of having a huge impact without it being noticed as much. But I guess kind of start off with our relationship. Let's talk about your love of the game of basketball. And how that even started.
Yeah, absolutely. So Evan, you may not know, actually, I'd like to share the story, how I heard about Andre, right? And I started company 2011. I remember the same year, unfortunately, NBA had a lockout year at that time. And I read it in the news, right? And most of the NBA players, guess what? They went on to maybe a vacation and doing something crazy stuff. And I read in the news, Andre, probably he was the only player left at that time, right? For the internship, right? I forgot where, in the university or Merrill Lynch. At that time, I realized, wow, Andre is a very different player. He knows what he's going to do in the future. At that time, I already told myself, someday I'm going to meet this guy. I really admire him. Right? That's why later on, several years ago, when I met him the first time, I remembered he's very tall. I tried to give him a big hug. I could not do it. But anyway, since then we become very good friends. I was so grateful, and Andrew also, became our investor. And I think hopefully I knew you a long time ago, right? But anyway, dream came true, and the greater relationship, started from there.
Appreciate it.
That's dope. So since then, prior to meeting him, I know you're a big basketball fan. Did you dive into playing basketball yourself? And who did you pattern your game after? Was it Andre? Was it like a Dwayne Wade, or were you kind of like Michael Jordan-esque, that type vibe?
So when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of basketball, of NBA, even until today. And I watched a lot of games, and for now I'm a huge fan of Warriors. And I knew a lot of players' name. I would say, since the first time I watched NBA games until today, I know there's so many great players. I would say the 4 players. First of all, Andre is for sure his great friend, is the most unselfish player in the league, right? Probably in the NBA history. Is a great leader. Let's talk about other 3 players. One for sure is Michael Jordan, right? Everyone agreed, right? So no one can bid against Jordan, right? Another one is Kobe Bryant. It's a hard work spirit should inspire a lot of other players, including myself as well. A lot of business leaders also learn from his hard work spirit. and a huge influence, right? And also another player is Stephen Curry. And because Stephen, helped the Warriors win the championship, everyone probably will say, yeah, if you play NBA game, for sure you'll be 6'7", very athletic. That's not the case. And he used his own way to win the final NBA champion. And his influence to the whole world is just amazing.
Yeah, so how did that influence you? You name a lot of great players, especially, lastly, Stephen Curry. How did he influence you in regards to, taking your game into the business world? Do you go into the business world with the same type of competitive nature that you see of some of the aforementioned athletes that you love and you frequently watch?
Absolutely. I think you look at the commonality among all those players, you have to love what you are doing. Because, to start a business is similar to win the champion. It's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of practice, right? And it's when you were very young, right? You already, you do not have time to play games. You have to go to the gym, right? To practice for many years, hard work. And that's one thing I learned, right? Only hard work will be very well paid off. And after that, you win the first champion, guess what? Very soon, after you celebrate, you have to start over again and again, right? You enjoy that. That's what I learned for business. Even let's say, we made some progress. I have to think about it. Every day is a different day. We have to start over, keep innovating, keep winning. That's what I learned from, watching the NBA games.
So basically in 2020 was kind of like your MVP championship, Olympic gold medal, Jordan-esque type year. In 2020, you won the Time Businessman of the Year. How did that feel? And obviously that was kind of like the end result of what people see. But tell us prior to, like, what it all took to get to that point and really, make it in America.
Thank you. That's a great question. So when the pandemic crisis hit us, we realized, wow, how to leverage Zoom service and product to help the world, to help the society, right? To help the kids, they can continue learning online, help the doctors to leverage telemedicine to serve for the patients, and all the businesses can count on Zoom to talk with the customers and the partners, and the government also can leverage Zoom as well. We felt the huge responsibility and also accountability. But again, that's not easy. More like analogy I share with my friends, prior to COVID, a crisis, more like Andrew and I, we were playing, junior varsity high school game. We played it relatively well. All of a sudden, we had to play for NBA game. Are we ready? No, we're not ready, right? Mentally, everything not ready. But how to quickly, the skill our business to think about how to leverage this opportunity to help the world. That's why I felt very proud, because we heavily invested company culture. No Zoomies, they complain about anything, right? Just work so hard, heads down to how to scale our business to help the world. Right? I learned a lot, but again, it's not easy. But one thing also, this also learned from basketball. You have to enjoy what you're doing. That's why looking back, even if I personally had a way more sleepless nights in any time of my career, but guess what? I truly enjoyed it.
That's a great analogy. You playing on the JV team and you got to go straight to the NBA, like right then and there. Like Evan and I wouldn't survive through the first warm-ups going from JV to the NBA. But let's take it back to the beginning, your earlier days. And I've heard it was you began your video conferencing journey when you wanted to have an easier way to connect with your long-distance girlfriend. So is that true? And if so, tell us about it. So you sound like Evan.
Yeah. So yes and no. And, I was early employee for WebEx. I was working on WebEx for many, many years until the day when I realized no customers, they liked the WebEx. I felt, a huge, responsibility, right, to fix that problem, to bring happiness back to WebEx customers. That's the whole reason why I left WebEx to start Zoom. And the day when I saw the demo, the product, the not only the prototype, this is a mock-up, not a mock-up, this is a real demo, the real product. The day when I saw that, I could connect the dots. Then I realized, wow, when I was young in the college, I remember that. It's more like a daydream. Someday in the future, I can have a smart device and one click, I can talk with my girlfriend, talk with my friends. And then at that time, I connected dots. And not like when I started Zoom, the goal was that. That's not the case. So to be frank. So.
I got you. Appreciate it.
So I was understanding that you kind of got inspired after you saw the conference in Japan where you saw Bill Gates speak.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little about that. That kind of played a big part in you, getting everything going, correct?
Absolutely right. So back in 1995, right, I was living in Japan for several months. And once, I remember over the weekend, actually, Bill Gates was there to give a keynote speech about internet. I was, so inspired by his speech. I realized internet is a future. Internet is going to change everything. And when I was a kid, I was also fascinated by, Silicon Valley, stories. At that time, I told myself, I better embrace the first wave of internet revolution, right?
And how old were you?
Move to Silicon Valley. So,
how old were you when this was going on?
I moved to the Valley, Silicon Valley, and when I was 27 years old.
So I'm asking because I never heard of Silicon Valley until I started investing on my own when I'm 26, 27 years old. So I live in America. I never heard of Silicon Valley. So it's just amazing. Evan, how old were you when you first heard of Silicon Valley?
Shoot, when you started talking about it.
Right. It's the truth.
So 5 years after that.
It's crazy. So, I'm reading that I'm reading that you applied for, your visa 9 times and, you got rejected 8 times. Most folks would have just gave up after the first or second try. What was it that kept you, motivated to try to get there? And what was it about Silicon Valley that inspired you to get there?
So, and first of all, this is also something what I learned from sports, right? If you want to achieve something, you cannot, stop in the middle of that, right? Never give up. This is something for any sports, right? You want to win, right? Well, and looking back, I felt that's not a bad thing. It's more like a practice, for my perseverance when I started a company, right? So this is ultimately that's a good thing. The Silicon Valley is a worldwide innovation center, right? And I wanted to embrace the first wave of internet revolution. I know actually, as long as I try very hard, once or twice, 3 times. Luckily, next attempt was successful. Not that bad. If I try to, 20 times, that's too long. So anyway, I think, it is well paid off.
So when you first came to Silicon Valley, what was some of the changes you needed to make, and what was different? Obviously, it was a culture shock, and I know for sure what your dad told you, the story that he gave you prior to leaving. Like, what was your whole feel when you landed? Was it everything you envisioned, or was it like, whoa, I got some work to do?
First of all, I love the Bay Area weather, right? That's for sure, right? So, but you are so right. A lot of things I have to, adapt, right? And before I came here, my father told me that hard work, still humble, always remember that, every day. But I think I learned a lot of things here because there's so many great leaders and who lived here, and they are all, wanted to help others. And that's why I learned a lot of things. But one thing I realized, it took me several years and to sort of to embrace the communication and the culture here. So meaning, I was born in China, right? And taught and raised, something like, hey, if you have a project or task, send it to you. You cannot talk with a lot of other people. You cannot talk with others. You have to get a thing done first. Before you get the project done, before you finish something, you start talking to others, guess what? people would say, yeah, you brag yourself, you talk big, you're full of hot air, right? That's why, my philosophy prior to moving to Silicon Valley was always get things done first and then communicate with others. But when I moved here, I realized that's completely opposite, right? It's totally different. You have to communicate with others, right? No matter you started or not, you need to keep everything open and transparent. Otherwise, give one example. Like I see, I leverage my free time to get something done. After finish that project, when I communicate with my manager we may not be happy. We'll be very upset. Why did you do that? Did you realize maybe some other members already had something like that, right? So then I realized you have to be open and transparent. Communicate with others before you get anything done. And that's not easy. And it took me many years to start, understand the importance of communicating with others proactively, be open and transparent.
Now, Evan spoke to you, or Evan asked you about, some, athletes who may have inspired you or you modeled your game at, but who are some of the business leaders and innovators that you looked up to when you moved over here and you started to maneuver around Silicon Valley?
Oh, even before I moved here, I knew a lot of good stories, like the former CEO of Intel, Andy Grove, right? And is a great leader. And then Sequoia, the investor, Mac Morris, and all those great leaders. And I read the book as well. And since I lived here, a lot of leaders truly helped me. I think one of the leaders, and I even do not know him, but his philosophy completely changed the way for me to understand what's the leadership. He was the former CEO of Walmart, H.D. Scott, right? When I was at Cisco, they invited him to give a keynote speech about leadership. I learned a lot, and that's probably the most the important leader who truly influenced me.
How does one become one of the first 20 employees of a company? That's what I want to know. How did you know that this was something you wanted to take on such an early time?
Yeah, so great question, and this more like I knew one of my friends. He worked for one of the co-founders of WebEx, and one of the co-founders of WebEx, he sold his the previous company, and then he started another company, and he tried to hire some engineers, and one of the guys he knew he trusted, and introduced me to them. And and that's why I moved to Silicon Valley because I can help to write a lot of code for them.
So you left you were at WebEx for a little bit and you decided to leave Zoom. Obviously, that's a big risk, and in order to leave Zoom, you have to meet with fundraisers, gather money, and everything like that. You said earlier that your perseverance of getting rejected with the visas and everything 8 times is what kept you going. But what made you believe that Zoom was a reason to keep persevering and fighting for?
I think a great question, Evan. First of all, the risk taking is part of the Silicon Valley culture, right? I call Silicon Valley more like a startup valley. I knew someday, I will start my own company, and just the timing, right? I think back to 2010 or 2011 timeframe, I realized the time was ready, and I wanted to build something and to build a better solution to bring happiness back to the WebEx customers. And however, when you started, the journey was not that smooth. I thought I might get a lot of VC supporters. And guess what? No VCs wanted to invest in me because looking back, they were also right because this market was so crowded, and why did the world needed to have another solution like this? But I talked with many customers. I knew that, and the customer, they were not happy about any solution we were using back then. But that's why I made up my mind. I have to build something better. And even if I did not get enough support and from those VCs, good news, I did not give up. And I found out a workaround. I talked with some friends. I got to save the money. And interestingly enough, it's always not a bad thing, right? When you got rejected by VCs, because I remember once I talked with the VC, I truly respected them. Unfortunately, they decided no. And the conversation was not that smooth. On the way back, I told myself, I got to prove you are wrong. And that conversation further motivated myself to build a better company. After back to the office, I changed my machines, my computers, the screensaver to be something like, you are wrong. So every day I walk in the office, I see that message to motivate myself.
I like that. I've been reading a good amount, the last couple of years on aggregators, and we talk about, what was, I don't know if they're still known as it, but the FANG stocks, obviously the larger aggregators, the companies that kind of, they say whatever product or field they're in, don't try to enter that same space. And, I can envision the VC saying why they wouldn't invest in, something, there's Microsoft Teams, there was Skype, Google Hangouts now. There were so many video communications platforms at the time. What made you want to, take on that task? Or what was it about yourself that you knew you can build something that's so different and have success?
So I would say, first of all, we know sports, we know basketball better than any of those competitors. So, meaning,
I like that.
We like sports. We think there's a competition, right? Business is ultimate sports, right? I know I can build something better. When I start a company and I understand the customer pain point, ease of use, quality is very important, right? That's how we started. But again, to build a business better than your competitors is not that easy. But I learned one thing is I hate losing, right? It's more like you play games. Anytime you play game, you do all you can. You do not want to lose. That's also what I learned, right? So every day I think very hard and how to make sure we keep winning. That's the reason why I think, along the way, right, over the past many years, we built a much better solution, a better, the service than any of those competitors.
So when you sit there, you talk about the service, and I know when you were speaking on WebEx, you said that was one of the reasons why you left, because you knew the customers were kind of, complaining. Obviously, a lot of businesses go in for profit, and they're all about profit. Why is customer happiness and, the feedback so important? Like, what does that play for further down the line?
Yeah, so we built a software as a service. We call it a SaaS. Right? Software is just the one part. The most important thing is the service. It's more like Andre and Evan, two of us, we walk into a restaurant, right? And if the food is not good, guess what? We are not going to come back anymore, right? If the food is good, and also the great price, the service also the awesome, we're going to come back and back, right? It's similar for us to build a service, a software service, right? To make sure customers are happy, they are going to, keep using our service, word of mouth, and going to share with others' experience. They're going to pay you, and then we can survive. That's very simple, right? And it's if your customer not happy, sooner or later you are going to hit the wall, right? They might cancel the service.
So yeah. And speaking of, not just service, but the culture of the company. In terms of starting your own company, did you understand how important leadership was in starting your own company? And if so, how did you know you had those leadership qualities, and do you enjoy being a leader?
It's a great question. And I remember on the first day, I did not, do a lot of things. And one of the things I did on the first day, to really think about a company culture and to write down a company culture, because I think it's extremely important. The reason why, because let's say you hired a bunch of engineers to develop a product, and how to make sure the team can work together well. Not like all in the office, right? The candidate can get a job done. If you do not share the same culture and value, guess what? After they leave the office and they never wanted to hang out together, right? It's more like a sports, right? If you wanted to win, not only do you win, on the court, most importantly is, and in the locker room, off the court, right? You also can hang out together, right? That's kind of the part of the culture. And that's the reason why we focus on the company culture. They all understand why do they work for Zoom. It's not only for product itself, but also think about the big picture. Together we build something, to make the world a better place, to serve for the community. And with that, we all understand, we share the same mission, and to focus on something very bigger, right? Than each of us can think about. That's why culture is very important. Our culture is very simple, just the 2 words: deliver happiness. For me, my priority is make sure Zoom employees happy, and together we make a customer happy, right? If we keep doing that, follow our company culture, I think someday will be okay, and that's the reason, and we really double down, triple down our company culture even from early on.
So from early on,
Evan,
there you go. Go, Jerry.
No, I just got one thing for you, Evan. How many coaches have you had that happiness and wasn't a part of the culture?
Man, a bunch. I think I was in to be honest with you, like when I hit college, to be completely honest, it was really the first time I heard a coach kind of say to a certain extent, and it's few and far between, players play best when they're happy. That was the first time I ever heard a coach say that. So he used to be like, yo, bruh, if I want you to put up 25 on the road for me tonight, I can't piss you off. And that's not me kissing your ass. That's me literally trying to figure out how can we work together to make sure we're both at the highest level we can be.
Yeah, you're so right. That's a foundation, for the teamwork spirit. If you do not share the same culture, it's really, really hard.
Absolutely. So prior to when you were starting, like I was saying, from the beginning, your whole vision, you went public in 2019. Was that also always the plan? I know you said that everybody's competitive and you want to take it to the top and see bigger pictures, but to start off and see where you came from, just off speaking from, Bill Gates, to move on up and, go public in 2019 and then pretty much set the world on fire in 2020.
Yeah, so since I moved to Silicon Valley in 1997, right? Remember back in the year 2000 in the dot-com, era, right? As so many companies went public. I still remember, right? A lot of immigrant founders, they started a company and went public. At that time, I already told myself, somebody in the future, I'd like to start a company. The goal was to become a NASDAQ public company. And that's my dream. I know it's not easy to achieve that dream. That's why hard work for many years finally was well paid off. We became a NASDAQ public company in April 2019. I can tell you, it's more like your dream came true. You were so excited. And several weeks before that, every time you think about that, you realize, hard work is well paid off. And I feel very proud of our employees, very grateful to our customer partner support. And on personal front, my father had a huge influence to me, even if he already passed away the year before I started the company. I can, privately, talk with him from the bottom of my heart. And I did not let my father down, right? And finally, we can become a public company now. And this is a great moment. And I feel like your American dream also became true, right? You become a public company. But one thing I also learned, also from sports, but even if you achieved something, it's more like you can celebrate, right? You feel proud. But guess what? You cannot stop here. The new game will start very soon. And it will further motivate us to become better, to further innovate. More like Andre, won the champion, right? And after he took a short-term break, he had to go back to the gym to practice harder because you want to win one more championship, right? That's why the experience more like a celebration, very excited, and also even more motivated to win more, to become a better company. That's also what I learned from sports, for basketball as well.
Yeah, I guess you equate, kind of going public, equate that to, getting drafted to the NBA. But like much like that, the running thing is, it's like when you get drafted to the NBA, that's when the real work starts,
You are so right on. I really like your analogy. You are so right on. Meaning you become a public company, you just become a player. There's so many other public companies, right? You're just a rookie player that year, right? So if you do well, but however, it's a long journey. does not mean you can win the NBA champion, right? You have to work harder to get there. So right on.
Dream. And I don't even want to correlate it I want to say this all respectful. And I'm asking because you break down the American dream, and a few people that made it big from there, which is one of my favorite, mentors or idols was, Bruce Lee, like water, and much like yourself, he kind of came from China. His dad kind of sent him a little early on at 15 to 16 or whatever, but he was able to make it big and kind of, be innovative in the sense of Hollywood and making, new faces, which was an Asian face, and bringing, new styles to, the American culture. Did you ever see that as motivation or anything? My fault for correlating that, but when I speak to you and your whole thought process, it kind of reminds me of like a like water mentality.
Yeah, my motivation is because when I was a kid, I was already sort of familiar with all of the stories that occurred here in Silicon Valley, right? Because Silicon Valley is very unique, has a very unique culture. No matter where you came from, no matter where you were born, as long as you work hard and build something and create a value for the world, right? Someday you will be successful because a lot of people, they will help you, right? I think it is meaning everyone has a equal opportunity as long as you create a value, right? That's part of the dream, right? That's why since I lived here, always think about, and this is my dream. I build something to create a value for the society. Someday you'll be successful. That's a fair game.
Mm-hmm. In terms of keeping value, you go public 2019. Then less than a year later, pandemic hits, around, what was it, March 2020, and the world just shuts down. And we're trying to figure out ways where we can, kind of physically touch each other. I mean, from every aspect, whether it's from business, from personal, any way you could think about it. You went from, I think it was 10 million daily users to 300 million daily users. And you're thrust in the spotlight on a global scale. Tell me how you were able to deal with that. What were some things that you didn't see coming? Everyone saw the good, but tell us a little bit about the things you had to really adjust to stay functional. We've been talking about crypto in the space, and the sad part about crypto is it's the opposite. The more users you have, the more it costs, as opposed to the opposite. So how was that whole transition?
So you're so right. And in terms of usage, by the way, that's not users. We call that meeting participants, right? Because you join a Bryant meeting,
yes.
We count it a two. So you look at the end of 2019, right? And on peak day, our daily meeting participant, just 10 million, right? And back to the March, April timeframe, it all the way went up to more than 300 million. Daily meeting participant. That's a crazy number. And, but every one of us here at Zoom, we realized, the world counted on us. This is a great opportunity, to tell the world, Zoom is a great company. The world can count on Zoom. We will do all we can to serve for the society, right? No one complained. The reason why, because, back to the culture, we heavily invested in the company culture, and everyone realized, how to deliver happiness to end user, to K-12 kids' schools, and to the government customers, to all the businesses, to the doctors, and even, a lot of, wedding ceremony were held, right, via Zoom platform, right? But also can tell you, back then, it's not that easy. It's so hard. And meaning, you have a totally different user base. Used to be Zoom was built to serve for enterprise customers. Suddenly, you have so many consumers. It's a very different user base. How to pivot your business and to embrace the first-time consumers is so hard. And every day, I can tell you, how to navigate through that. I did not have a good formula. I struggled for a while until I figured out a formula how to navigate through the short-term pain or the long-term gain. Because ultimately, anything we learned, any mistake we made, as long as we can become a better company, we are going to benefit from that. So the formula I remembered back then, every morning when I woke up, I told myself, let's fast forward to 2030 or 2035, right? And looking back, all those short-term pains, or not a pain anymore. More like Andrew, like Evan, you played a game before, right? Either your college game or some important game, you lost the one game. But looking back, you may not remember that, right? Because all the experience you learn from that will help you more to win more down the road. That's the formula I learned. And finally, I realized. So yeah, do all we can, think about the long run, to leverage the opportunity to help the society. Any of those short-term pains are very manageable afterwards.
So you say that you tell your employees to look at like 2035, look to 2075. Where do you see the company going in the next 5 to 10 years, and where do you think the market will be? When you first got in, you said it was super crowded. How do you think, like, what's next for the company?
Yeah, so we are very, very excited about the future. The reason why is I think literally we just started. And several years ago, at one of our user conference, we call that Zoomtopia. We already painted a vision where imagine the future and where we can leverage Zoom and we can shake hands. I give a hug, you feel my intimacy. And Andrew got a cup of coffee. One click, I can enjoy the smell remotely. And even any two persons speak a different language, you do not need to learn a new language. Leverage the real-time language translation, right? That's a world where we are going to live. In other words, more like that's a metaverse, right? I think, that's the reason why we are very excited. Zoom would play a big role to help to become a great, the collaboration solution to help the world.
So where do you see the next? Evan, you got something? Go ahead.
Oh no, that's just crazy if that could happen. Real-time translation, that's crazy.
Yeah, they working
on it.
We
already have that feature today. We already have that real-time language.
Oh, do you? Oh, I don't be using it.
We gotta get Evan out here to the valley.
I only talk to the homies on here. I don't be across the world, but I got you.
No, but point forward, we changing it. We're gonna be global. So talk to us about the hybrid work life and where you see that going and how Zoom plays a role in that, from stay at home to be in the office a certain amount of time, certain amount of days, and your vision on that.
Yeah, that's something new. It's, if one of the things I would say out of those crazy, COVID-19 crisis, one of the positive things is, and the future work, it is not going to go back to 5 days a week in the office. Right, it will be the hybrid work. So meaning you really do not need to go back to the office 5 days a week, right? You need to think about, giving employee flexibility, like maybe 2 or 3 days in the office or 2 or 3 days at home. There's a lot of benefits, right? Employee will have more time, and you can save the commute time, and also is good for climate change as well, right? And that's ultimately that direction-wise, that's hybrid work. Again, that's not easy. Right. And also it does bring some challenges, right? And how many days you want an employee work from home or work in the office, right? How to make sure every employee, they can, work together, right? It's more like the future of a workplace, more like become a mentoring or coaching place, right? It's not like a traditional way we set up office, everyone has a queue, right? And, how to truly embrace that also need some technology as well. Because when you work from home, on the way to the office, in the office, you want to give employee a very consistent, the experience. All the product or service, you let your employee count on, and you have to be, the world-class service, right? Make sure employee, they feel very happy, no matter where they are to use their service, right? Again, a lot of challenges for us to embrace the hybrid work, but that's a future. Because I think that's not fair, to force employee to go back to the office 5 days a week. I'm not saying for every businesses. Maybe some businesses do, right? But most of the businesses, I do not think you need an employee go back to the office 5 days a week.
Let's see what Kyrie thinks about that.
But for basketball, for sure you need, right? You have
we got to go in every day. We got to go in every day.
That was kind of like Phil Jackson back in the day. He wanted to, towards the end of the Lakers' tenure, didn't he only want to do home games? He didn't want to do road games, basically? So that would work.
That might be true.
You remember that?
Yeah. They don't make it a big deal when it's feeling those guys, but when it's we won't go there. But go ahead.
Doing labor. Yeah, keep going.
In terms of innovation, what drives you to continue to, innovate? And, what do you want your legacy to ultimately be when it's all said and done?
So, speaking of innovation, right, it's more like, you want to learn more skills, right, when you play basketball, right? Remember Kobe, right? He learned a lot of shooting skills from Michael Jordan, The reason why, for him to learn that, the reason why for every, basketball player to learn that is you want to win, right? You do not want to lose the game, And the same thing for business, for Zoom as well. And the reason why we have to innovate, because if we do not even innovate, guess what? Very soon we're going to lose the game, right? And because every day they're full of new problems, and the customer, they might have a new pain point. How to the customer solicit their feedback and to keep innovating. Otherwise, the customer, they might go to your competitor solution, right? That's why the motivation is keep winning. To keep winning, you have to innovate.
And what advice would you give to other founders? But you pretty much gave out $1 million worth of game, so appreciate that.
I'm not sure I can give a lot of other founders some advice. This is the one. Let's say if I tell the younger version of myself, the young founders, I would say, number one thing is really, really, really figure out a way to enjoy the game. That's really important because it's a long journey, right? Every day, no matter how good you think you already made let's say you made a very good progress. Because tomorrow, the following day, you might face all kinds of challenges, right? Good times or challenging time. You have to enjoy every game, enjoy every day. That's really, really, really important. Otherwise it's hard. And second thing, my lesson I learned is, be patient. No one, no team, no players can achieve the overnight success. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Curry, right? He joined the Warriors team back to, I think, 2009, right? And and guess what? It took him 5 years to win the first champion. It's not 1 year, 2 years, even if this is great, the player is, is kind of a top 3-pointer shooter in the NBA history, still 5 years. You look at Andrew, your great friend, LeBron James, how many years did it take for him to win the champion? Right?
Mm-hmm. He won the first ship with Miami. Yeah.
I think 9 years, right? Yeah, 9 years. So that's why be patient. And if you're not patient, you cannot win your first champion. So that's if I can, this is my advice to the young founders.
And I guess for me, to kind of finish it off, always in the back of my mind, I made a few donations here and there, some, but putting my name on it just to get more notice, whether it be with the foundation I'm doing some work with, or, I had disaster relief and I wanted to bring light of it. So I put my name on it. But the majority of my foundations have been anonymous. And, we had the ticket giveaway where you donate tickets every year to fans. And, you see different players have their different names on the tickets in the stands. And I always had anonymous, and people, always wonder why. But I think you kind of epitomized it when you made a huge donation and no one knows where it went. And I was such a huge fan of that. So can you kind of give us some, what's your train of thought in terms of, how you decide to give back in your philanthropic endeavors?
So, Andrew, that's why you're my great friend. We share a lot of things, very similar, right? And also, I like that philosophy as well, right? And philanthropy work is very important. And this is a part of the culture, in particular, Silicon Valley. A lot of leaders I know, they made a lot of contributions, to a lot of things, right? And to focus on philanthropy work, like Bill Gates recently announced something, and also the VCs, like John Doerr, and so contributed to Stanford Sustainability School. You name it, almost every leaders, right? They all focus on the philanthropy work. This is the culture, right? However, different people might have a different the mindset. Someone want to be, anonymous. You and I, like that. And someone they do not want to be anonymous. That's okay. But as long as we all think about, right, we are part of this society. We cannot only look at ourselves, how to think about others, care about others, how to leverage your success, right? And to help others, to help society, to focus on philanthropy work. That's the most important thing. Regardless anonymous or not, that's not important. The way I understand that philanthropy work is, we are part of this world. We are just a piece of that, right? How to think about a bigger picture to help the world, help others, help the society. That's very important. That's more meaningful than you achieve a short-term success, because that may not be sustainable. Like a climate change, we all need to care about that. We need to do all we can to contribute to that as well.
Well, I appreciate the time. This has been amazing conversation. A lot of parallels from sports, tech, business, and they all kind of intertwine. And I appreciate you navigating us through your journey, through your world, and how you're going to continue to innovate. And, we would just love to continue to be a part of those conversations, keep a close eye on what you're doing. And whenever you need us, just let us know. And hopefully we can continue to, be best of friends, but also collaborate on some great things to change the world. So thank you, Eric Yuan, CEO, founder of Zoom. The reason why everyone's doing a podcast and everyone's able to connect virtually.
Thank you, my friends. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Thank you.